Thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you this evening, and a big hello from Macduff and from Macduff Marine Aquarium, where, if you haven't gathered already, I am located today, and this is our main central tank that I'm sitting in front of. I will explain a little bit about what's going on behind me later on in my chat. But first, I wanted just to introduce me a little bit. Why is a Hertfordshire girl talking about Moray Firth? What's interesting about it, and why am I bringing it to you in your homes this evening? I studied zoology in Aberdeen many years ago, and have basically become involved in. I studied marine science and was very interested in the oceans. I studied again for a master's degree in California, and I was lucky enough to spend some time at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which sort of turned me on to how educational aquariums can be in raising awareness about marine life. And then when I got back, there was this little aquarium being opened in the North Aberdeenshire coast in Macduff, looking for an education officer. So I applied to that, and kind of been here ever since. And I'm now managing it, as Gordon mentioned at the beginning there. And so really, Macduff Marine Aquarium has been here since the late 90s, and does only feature the marine life of the Moray Firth. So I'm going to introduce a little bit to you the Moray Firth, and the best way I thought of doing it was by showing you a little. There's a very short video which actually is at the entrance to our aquarium, which puts the aquarium in its context. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully I will get this right, and we'll go for that. Window, and no, okay, if I open this, and you're not seeing that yet, are you? I want to share the window. Sorry, folks, bear with me. Share. Okay.
That's it coming now.
Now go for this. All right. You've got that now?
Yep.
You have. So you've got a map of the north of Scotland.
That's correct.
Fantastic. Okay, so where we're looking at is the Moray Firth, that big triangle that's cut out right in the north of Scotland. So it stretches from Fraserburgh in the east all the way up to Duncansby Head in the north. Now, the Moray Firth has 800 kilometres of coastline. It's flanked at the north and the east tips with very steep and rocky cliffs, but it also has a lot of sandy bays. It has several inner firths which form fantastic estuaries, and we have a lot of rocky shoreline as well in between. So it's a real diverse coastline, and as such then creates a fantastic variety of different marine habitats for the life that stays here. Our little introduction here also explains that the geology of the Firth is fascinating. We have rocks that are over 500 million years old, and like I said, they are completely dramatic cliffs that they form. Our part of this coastline in Macduff is actually a site of special scientific interest for the geology. So again, creates lots of habitats for marine wildlife. The open Firth is generally actually quite shallow. It's usually about 80 metres, but there is a deep water trench called the Southern Trench, which is just, as the description mentions, just off the top of Fraserburgh, and that descends to about 200 metres. And there we have a lot of cold, nutrient-rich water that comes up from the depths and feeds the plankton and feeds the food chain, and so a lot of marine life comes to this area. So I mean, that was a basking shark, that image, and we have lots and lots of seabirds visiting, including internationally important populations for waders that come to the estuaries, which are really productive environments as well. Just along our coastline here, about 15 miles away from Macduff, which I hope you've spotted on the map by now, which is our little logo is there on the on the aquarium logo is right there. And at Troop Head, which is a very sheer headland just across, just 15 miles from us, there is a fantastic seabird colony there, home to about 4,000 pairs of gannets. It's Scotland's only mainland gannet colony, and just one of the amazing wildlife hotspots that we have here. A lot of other seabirds come here as well. So in addition to the seabirds, Moray Firth is actually famous for its bottlenose dolphins. I don't know if the couple I was speaking to earlier who were just in Brora, they might have seen them on the other side of the Firth as well. But the inner Firth, so that's sort of the bit that stretches really sort of between Nairn and Cromarty, is designated site of is a special area of conservation for the dolphins. But they're here year round, and we see them passing by the aquarium from time to time, and it's really lovely to see them out and about. As well as dolphins, the other cetaceans that we see from time to time as well, and minke whales, even orca. Seals are other marine mammals which are much more common. You see them bobbing around quite a lot here, and then again in the sands on the northern parts of the Moray Firth, they tend to breed there on the beaches, and we get a mix of grey and common seals. And yeah, really charismatic species, and it's again they're here because of the rich pickings. So coming under the water, this is what I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about today. A lot of the rocky shoreline is actually fringed with kelp, and we'll talk about that in detail in a bit. But kelp is a very, very interesting habitat. It's really, really diverse, one of the most productive marine habitats on the planet, actually, and can support a massive amount of marine life. So as our tank here features kelp, we'll be talking about that a little bit more in the course of the evening. For any salmon fishers among us, you may be well aware that this River Spey is feeding into the Moray Firth and is one of our largest salmon rivers. And salmon, of course, have had a real part to play in the history of this part of the coastline, having been commercially fished very sort of into the 1800s and such like. So this bit gets a bit boring on our video. It does talk a little bit more about the boring. That's maybe not quite right, but it does tell you a little bit about the kind of the social history now, which is not what we're going to be talking about today. But it does give us the context of the pressures that are on the Firth. This is Inverness, for example. And a bit of the history as well. I think it goes on to the fishing. Yeah, so the fishing, I just mentioned about the salmon and sea trout and herring, but I'm sure you would have been all very aware of the herring fishery, which was super important to this area. And up until the 1970s, when it actually crashed completely, and we don't see the same sort of levels of herring anymore, because when you see this sort of fishing activity going on and just the abundance of fish, it is completely depleted. We have now moved the fishing effort to offshore, and Fraserburgh is very big fishing port, but as is Peterhead, which is a little bit round the corner towards Aberdeen around the coastline. So that's one of Europe's biggest fishing ports. So the Moray Firth is less important than it used to be in terms of fishing, but still very much part of our social history. And still important in terms of the economy, because there's still a lot of boat building that goes on, which has always been associated with the fishing industry. And in fact, Macduff here has a very lively and commercially successful shipyards, and it's one of the last places in the country that still makes wooden boats. So that's quite lovely. So aside from that, obviously we have the energy industry, which has been prominent. We had the Beatrice oil field in right smack bang in the middle of the Moray Firth, and that has moved now on to a little bit more focus on wind farms. This one is now in the Beatrice area, which is in the middle of the Moray Firth flagged up on the map there, and we're due to get another one built in the next couple of years as well. And leisure tourism, we always we know people like to enjoy the sea, they like to enjoy marine wildlife, and we're combining it beautifully up here with our wealth of marine wildlife and opportunities to get close. And in fact, for a number of years, my husband and I actually ran a wildlife watching boat trips along the coastline. So we've had many encounters with our local marine life. So the aquarium sits there on the shores on the Moray Firth. Here's us here. This is our location with from a drone, and so you can see we're very close to the sea, and that's the tank, the main tank that I'm sitting in front of at the moment, and it's here because we are featuring the local species. Now we're one of the only am I back? Yeah. We're one of the only aquariums in the country that still features native marine life. In fact, everything we have in our aquarium here is actually seen just out in those waters. And yeah, we enjoy showing it off to about, well, in normal times, about 50,000 visitors a year. So our aquarium features the Moray Firth's different marine habitats, and all the exhibits are kind of crowded around that central exhibit that you saw, like a donut in the whole of the middle of the building is our main tank, which is behind me here. And we tend to lead the visitor from the estuaries, so we feature some tanks and displays with estuary animals in them, and then we go to the rocky shores where we'll see animals that are really living at the tide's edge, where the environment is really tough. The sea rushes out twice a day, so marine animals are stranded on land and have to have all sorts of adaptations to survive until the sea can come back in again, and they can get on about their normal business of living and feeding and what have you. So we have some rock pool animals and we have some shallow water species. Then we move offshore a little bit to the Kelp Reef, which is behind me, and then the other exhibits are about the sandy seafloor, the muddy seafloor, which is what is coating most of the shallow waters of the Moray Firth and the outer Firth. So ideally, then it takes people on a bit of a journey, and we get to this point here, which is the biggest tank in the aquarium, and in fact it is our central exhibit, as I've mentioned, and it features Kelp Reef. Now it's one of a kind actually in the UK. There isn't another one like it in the whole country. It's open to the air, as you saw from the video there, and it is 5 meters deep, 10 meters across. It holds 400,000 liters of seawater, and we bring the seawater directly in from the sea, which is handy, right on our doorstep, and it gets filtered and pumped around all the exhibits, and comes into here. This tank is on a filtration system, obviously, to keep the water nice and clean, and it turns over about 4 times completely in one day. So it's on a constantly cleaning and filtering system. So we have natural daylight coming in. So what you're seeing behind me is we're still, I don't know what time you guys are finding it's getting dark these days, but we're still in daylight up until 10 o'clock. So this is just natural daylight that's lighting the tank behind me. We haven't put any spotlights on it for you or anything tonight. And at this time of year, not only does the sunlight allow the kelp to survive, but we also get prolific growth of a green algae kind of plant that floats around. So we spend a lot of time cleaning that out. So what's so special about kelp? Why do we care about it? Why are we spending all this effort to bring a kelp reef into the middle of our aquarium? Kelp is a brown seaweed. I'm sitting right by some here. and it is a tall brown seaweed. And it has a long leathery stipe and a holdfast, which is it's not quite a root system because it doesn't actually use gain nutrients for the plants like a root would. It just basically holds the plant in place. And then it has this lovely big leafy fronds. I think if I move away, there you go, there's some wafting behind us. And these will provide a habitat for many different species. Kelp will grow just slightly from the low shoreline. So when the tide goes out, you reach to the very low shore, and on a very low tide, you might see the tops of the fronds just appearing out of the water. But it grows. It needs sunlight to grow, and it will grow to depths of about 15 meters. And it forms what we call a reef or a forest because it will grow in great dense clumps. And a kelp plant with all the different components of it will support many different animals. So if you're looking really quite closely at it, there'll be animals that will nest or grow on the kelp itself, although it's sort of covered in a slimy mucus, so that's not so easy. But there's some animals such as sponges or bryozoans or anemones which will actually grow on the plant itself. The holdfasts are really twisted and convoluted, and in amongst the nooks and crannies of that, there'll be all sorts of different creatures such as sea urchins. There will be starfish and brittle stars, and snails and crabs will all scurry in among that. The stipe itself, again, will have some encrusting organisms on it. And then if you can imagine like a forest on land, you have the canopy as well. And that's where you'll have your fish swimming around, or your grazers will be grazing on top of the actual kelp itself. Grazers of kelp can be a bit of a problem. So sea urchins, can you see one there? Just that little ball of spikes there. And one above me as well, up there. So sea urchins are real predators of kelp, if you like. So they are grazers that we have to watch out for. They are little balls of spines related to the starfish, and they will wander along and munch on kelp. They absolutely love to eat it. In areas where sea urchins are not kept in check by predators, for example, and we'll talk a little bit about the kind of animals that will eat some sea urchins, because they're nice once you get into them. In fact, these are edible sea urchins, and we're known to eat them ourselves, although given that it's the gonads that you're eating, it's not really appealing to me, but that is an edible sea urchin. The sea urchins, if they're not kept in check, can actually destroy whole kelp reefs. So it is quite a delicate balance. So the kelp forest itself is literally like a forest on land, with different levels at supporting different sorts of marine life. And most of the animals that we have in this tank behind me will spend some of their life, if not all of it, in and amongst the kelp plants. Kelp forests also are quite sheltered environments, and will provide a home for quite juvenile or smaller fish, which will be able to just be protected from the greater storms and what have you coming in. The kelp forest forms a bit of a barrier to storms as well. It kind of absorbs the energy of the waves coming in, so it can also help protect our coastlines as well. So it's important stuff, and in fact it is a massive absorber of carbon dioxide as well. So it will absorb a lot more even than trees can, and certainly absorbs a lot of the carbon dioxide that comes into the ocean. So it is possibly going to be helpful in the fight against climate change. So kelp is great stuff. So The animals behind me are all sort of doing their thing, and it might be, if I'm not sure how well this is going to work, if I'm going to be able to get my camera to show you some of the creatures. I might have to take myself out of the picture and just focus in on the tank itself, so that you can see. We're going to see my reflection. That's not so helpful.
We've seen that fine, Claire.
You've seen that? Okay. So what I'm showing you, yeah, that's the kelp. That's the reflection there. Sorry about that. So what I'm showing you is a bit of a view into the main tank, and lots of different species. We have about 100 different individual fish in here, and a good number of different species. There's some that are down on the ground. I don't know if my camera can pick that up very well. There are some flatfish that will just nestle in on the open bits amongst the rocky reefs, and other animals that will just swim gently around the reefs. So typical fish that we would have in the Moray Firth and the North Sea in general. I'm sure many of you would be familiar with them, but generally probably seeing them on your plate. So very typical fish would be the cod family. These are whitefish. They would include the cod himself. I think I'm going to try and get them all to come over. Usually this works if you try and attract them. Not tonight. Like I said, in the evening they tend to do different things. So the cod himself. Now I can't find one. There we go. We've mostly got pollock in front of the window, and we have them all coming over just now. Those are all pollock. So those are relatives of the cod family. The saithe is another one that's going past, which has a grey streak down the side of it, a grey line, lateral line. Oh, here's a pollock. He's right up at the window. Oh, there he is. There he goes. They've got a great kind of pouty looking mouth. These guys will mostly spend their early lives in the kelp forest, and they are very, very common. You'll often see them even in rock pools, little tiny pollock and saithe. They start out life here and then eventually will move offshore, where they become bottom dwelling, and they will feed on crustaceans, prawns and crabs and a small fish. The pollock here, he's got a big old mouth. You can see that pout. And he's actually got big lips, which is really useful for positioning his food just as he needs it, and into his mouth there. The cod is still not appearing, but he has a very distinctive chin barbel, or sensory barbel under the chin. So when they've moved offshore and they're into the slightly murkier waters of the deeper Moray Firth, they use their barbel. Oh, here comes one here now. They use their barbel. Let's see if I can pop him in the. I hope you've got him at the bottom there. Can you see him there? He's swimming down. No.
No.
He's just ducked. Sorry, he's just ducked down. Not so handy. They use their barbels to help searching in the sand for any good treats to eat. Again, such as fish and crustaceans. Now, just going away from us is one of our largest inhabitants, which is Jemima. She's just now heading off under the archway, and she is an Atlantic halibut. Again, these animals would start out life in the sheltered areas and would head off into the open water as they get bigger. Now, halibut, again, is probably something that you're aware of from the fishmonger. They're actually endangered these days, but they are fantastic flatfish. They are the largest of all flatfish, and they can get to be over 2 meters, even 3 meters, and weigh 250 kilos. Now, Jemima has been with us, oh gosh, at least well, since 2008. So that's what, 20 years. Sorry, not 20 years, 2008. That's 12 years. It seems like 20. And she's grown up from being just about 50 centimeters, and she's now about nearly 1.5 meters. She's nearly 1.5 meters, but she still has some growing to do. Now, flatfish are quite interesting. I've got some at the floor here. Not really. I'm paying attention to the tank and not really where my camera is. Again, I don't know if the camera will pick those up, but I've got a variety of flatfish at the bottom there. Can you see some turbot? Now, they are absolutely camouflaged against the gravel there. I've got lemon sole going past there. We'll have plaice and flounders and dab as well. And again, they are super camouflaged against the seabed. There's a brill coming past. Hopefully you can see it. Yes, I can see that one. And a turbot now. In fact, here they all come. Look, there we go, turbots. Oh, and there's one coming up to the window. Perfect. So flatfish are quite interesting because they will all start out life actually looking like a normal fish. So bony fish have a larval stage. When they hatch from eggs, they look very weird compared to the adult fish, but the flatfish will actually look like a normal larval fish with eyes on both sides of its head. But as it changes after about 5 days or so, sometimes longer, depending on species, but one eye will move from the side of one eye will move across from the middle of the head across to the side of the head, and the body flattens out and it sort of then lies on its side. So what would be typical as a dorsal fin, which is the fin that runs along the top of a normal fish, now is kind of running along the side of the flatfish, and the pectoral fins become sort of little flappy fins behind the gills on the flatfish. So we have a variety of different species, and they're all very active this evening, which is quite lovely. So we do also have sharks and rays, of course. Everybody is always keen to see some sharks. And we have 4 different species of sharks and rays in the aquarium. The one that's up at the window is a thornback ray. What differentiates sharks and rays from bony fish is that their skeleton is made from cartilage and not bone. This is the stuff that's in our ears. It's very flexible and bendy. It gives a lot of structure to the animal, but also allows it to be very lightweight in the water and helps with keeping it buoyant. It does mean that there is no swim bladder. Now, if you can see in the center of the tank, our bony fish that are the pollock and the saithe are just hanging there. They're doing nothing really to keep themselves afloat. The odd flick of the tail. And so those fish actually have what's known as a swim bladder on the inside. And the swim bladder is basically a bag of gas, which keeps the animal afloat. Not all of bony fish have them. If you see this little lemon sole that's in front of us here, look at his little face. Oh, he's doing a backflip. He's a bottom dwelling fish, has no need for this swim bladder. So when he stops swimming, he just sinks to the bottom. And that's the way with the rays and the sharks as well. So one of the other features that we use to tell them apart is that they must keep swimming in order to stay afloat. Otherwise, they just glide to the bottom. The other interesting difference between the sharks, the rays, and bony fish is the way they reproduce. Now, most of these bony fish, like this pollock going past us here, will produce very, very many eggs. I mean, the cords, for example, will produce 2 to 8 million eggs in one go, and just these will be released into the water and fertilized in the water, and then they will grow and hatch and join the plankton and take their chances. Whereas the sharks and the rays put much more energy into their reproduction and actually produce what we call a mermaid's purse. Now I've got a dried out one here. This is a mermaid's purse from a thornback ray. And so the female will lay one of these at a time. Oops, where am I? There it is. And she will bury this. This is a one from Array. She will bury this sort of half in the mud, and also attach it to something. This usually comes with a bit of mucus, which attaches it to the rocks, keeps it in place. Now it's tough and leathery, and the embryo. Oops, I keep losing it. The embryo will develop inside. Just one will develop inside this protective case, and it will take about maybe 9, maybe more months, depending on the water temperature, until it hatches, looking just like a miniature adult, and starts out life, as an adult would, and just a smaller version. So those are the thornback rays. That was the thornback ray that we've just seen. The two shark species that we have are, well, I've always called them dogfish. We have the lesser spotted dogfish and the bullhuss. I can see one. Yeah, he's just sloped over the rocks at the back there. Oh, there's one going above my head. It's not much use to you, but I'll try and point them out if one comes by again. But these I've always known as dogfish, but they are members of the cat shark family, so it's a tad confusing. Are they dogs or cats? We've started to call them more cat sharks now. So we have lesser spotted cat shark, and the bullhuss is still the bullhuss. And they are small sharks, really. They don't grow massive, maybe 75 centimeters for a lesser spotted dogfish, a bit bigger for the bullhuss, quite a lot bigger for the bullhuss. And again, they are bottom dwelling. They'll live in amongst the kelp. They live in the Kelp Reef and then on the rocky seabed, and they will patrol looking for crustaceans to eat. They have very, very strong jaws. They don't have great massive teeth like you would see in some other shark species. But they have very strong jaws, which will clamp down and crush any hard-shelled prey that they're interested in taking. So yeah, those are those two. We have a very successful breeding program here with lots of small rays and dogfish that we hatch here in the aquarium. We also took delivery of. That's a very strange way to put it, but we also welcomed to our collection at just before Christmas last year a very interesting species known as a flapper skate. Now, a flapper skate used to be called a common skate until they realized that actually the common skate was one name which comprised two different species. The blue skate and the flapper skate. Now, they used to have a range that extended all around Scotland, and they were massively fished out until these days. They are now critically endangered. Now, our flapper skate came to us thanks to the Orkney Skate Trust. So it was found as part of a survey that the citizen science group Orkney Skate Trust was taking part in up in Orkney, funnily enough. And now there is known to be a viable population of flapper skates up there. And they had been collecting the mermaid's purses. Now, this is the size of a mermaid's purse from a thornback ray, but the flapper skates one would be at least twice the size of this, if not more, because flapper skates are the largest skates in the world and will reach 2 meters across. Now, the flapper skate purse that was collected, they had thought it was unviable, but actually were surprised to find that there was an embryo inside. Now, it's actually illegal to land any flapper skates now that they are protected by law. So they needed to get permission, and they did so from Marine Scotland. And the researcher who collected it actually kept it in in a fish tank in his garage, and was able actually to hatch it out. And it hatched last September. So he was then sort of faced with, well, now what do I do with a critically endangered flapper skate that's going to need feeding. So through our various contacts, we got hold of it, and it was brought to us by truck and ferry, and he's been named Cedric, and he lives with us now. He's not in this tank yet because he's only a baby. He's still about the size of an A4 sheet of paper. But he will grow and will eventually make his way into this tank. He is an ambassador for his species, really, because he is rarer, or his species are rarer than giant pandas, and we're doing what we can to help support research into flapper skates. And we are providing information on his growth rate and his food preferences and such like to various scientists. Coming up to the window now is a different species. This is a blonde ray. So again, just a very typical ray shape with the wide wings. These guys are actually adapted to live on the seabed. It looks like a face underneath, but it's its mouth and nostrils, and his eyes are on the top of the head, so they can look for predators and food around them. And again, they will feed on, well, the flapper skate will feed on pretty much anything. So we're a little bit concerned about what is going to be keeping with him in his tank. But hopefully he'll be learning to just feed what we give him and not help himself to his tank mates. That would not be a good thing. Oh, here comes a bullhuss. Oh, come on, get into my camera. There he goes. Very shark-like shape to him, and as you see, using his whole body to swim and propel himself along in the water column. So there we go, sharks and rays. It's amazing how fascinated people are by sharks, and they do have a bit of a bad rep, I think, but we are obviously very passionate about them, and trying to do what we can to help people understand that they have quite a slow growing the method of reproduction is quite slow. For example, Cedric, the flapper skate, will take 10 years to mature. So a population will take a long time to recover. There's just Jemima going overhead. There you go, just give you an idea of the size of her. Going about the tank as well, we have a number of salmon. These came to us from a farm up actually on the north of Scotland, by the Falls of Shin, up that way, and they are growing very well. Salmon will spend some time in the kelp forest, generally on their way back to find the rivers that they were born in. I'm sure you're all very well aware of the salmon's life cycle, which is quite amazing. They're born in a river. The eggs are laid in what's called a red, which is a kind of a gravelly nest in the top of a river. When the youngsters are born, they spend some years maturing until eventually they work their way out to sea, and then they'll be out there for about 5 to 7 years, getting bigger and bigger. And some salmon, I mean, those guys well, they've been with us only a couple of years, but they eat a lot, and yeah, they're growing. Here's one up at the window now, going past us, and they will fatten up over the years that they're in the open ocean, and eventually will make their way back to the river that they started out from. And their migrations can be several thousand miles. It's quite phenomenal. And I'm sure it's well documented, and I'm sure you will all know the obstacles that they can overcome in order to get back to the river that they started in. So, gosh, who else have we got left? We've got the wrasse. Now, the wrasse are a group of fish. We have a family of fish called wrasse, and we have 5 different species of wrasse in our waters. Now, well, of course, there were a couple up at the window just a second ago, and they've moved on. We have in this tank ballan wrasse and cuckoo wrasse, and the ballan wrasse are Fish that will live most of their lives in amongst the kelp forest. They are supremely well adapted to living in amongst the fronds of the kelp, and they take on a kind of a browny green coloured um, to their bodies, like a mottled appearance, and they will live in amongst the fronds. Oh, there's one coming over here. That's a cuckoo wrasse. Now, let's see. If you watch it swimming, I'm hopefully getting it. That's it. Above the turbots. I'm not really sure what you. Hopefully, you can see that one looking right at us. And you can see that it's using its pectoral or side fins. That makes it really maneuverable in the kelp as it's disappearing off into that kelp there, just to show us how well it can hide. That was the cuckoo wrasse. That is actually Britain's most colourful fish. We all tend to think of fish as being a bit drab, a bit grey maybe, but the cuckoo wrasse is bright blue and orange. Now, that's the male. The female, I haven't got her in sight at the moment. She's been dotting in about the kelp. In fact, well, yeah, I don't think my camera's going to pick that up. She is swimming a little bit mid-water. She's pink or peachy coloured with black and white markings on the dorsal fin. Now, cuckoo wrasse and ballan wrasse, in fact, as well, although you can't actually tell the difference between the male and female ballan wrasse, but they are what we call sequential hermaphrodites. So that means that actually all start out life as female with that pink coloration, and they live generally in groups with several females and one male. And then when the male dies, the senior ranking female, who's usually the eldest, will actually change sex and become a male and live out the rest of their lives as a male. So that is quite a fascinating life story, really, and must get quite complicated, especially for the ballan wrasse when it's not so obvious who's who, really. But I guess they know. So, mostly, I think I've covered. Oh, there goes another turbot and a saith. I've mostly covered the main animals that are here in the tank. We also have octopus and seahorses. We have a lot of invertebrates as well, which not many aquaria have on display. We have some fabulous fireworks anemones and some dahlia anemones, which are really bringing a lot of colour to our rocky reefs. There are also jellyfish and our octopus. Now, our octopus is in a tank that's not going to really. I think it's actually the lights have gone out in the rest of the aquarium now, so it's not going to be so easy to show you. But octopus, we have. It's a lesser octopus, which is a very common species in our waters. But again, octopus are fascinating creatures, which we absolutely love having here and watching her. We keep them on their own because they're solitary in the wild. They are they're very short-lived, so they have an awful lot. They have a lot of intelligence, and they have a lot to learn in a short lifetime. They are they have, well, obviously 8 arms. They have 3 hearts. They are thought to have a brain almost, or a collection of nerves in each arm. So they explore their environment using suckers on the underside of their arms and just kind of taking in senses from around them. They are preyed on by just about everything. Everything would take an octopus. I bet one of our sharks that's just gone by would absolutely love one. So they are masters of disguise. They completely camouflage themselves very quickly against their background. They can get away quickly if they need to. They have, although they normally crawl around to move, they have a siphon at the side of their head, so they can shoot away with jet propulsion which allows them then to leave the scene. They also have ability to release a cloud of ink, which provides a smokescreen for them as they go. And yeah, they can solve practical problems that we pose for them. We put they like to eat crabs, so we'll put a crab in a jar for the octopus so that they have something to do sometimes in their tanks, just to keep them challenged and enrich their environment when they're here. So yes, lots of marine life that I could witter on about all evening. I'm aware though that it's already 8:20 and I've been yapping on for ages. So I might just finish, because otherwise I'm going to talk about fish for ages. Is there anything particular that I haven't covered that you would be interested in hearing about, Gordon, perhaps?
Yeah, that was fascinating. It's amazing what's going on around our own shores. Yes, I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. I've got queens in front of me. Hey, Dottie, you're muted, Dottie. So.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Oh, good. Thank you, Claire. That was absolutely fascinating. And there's nothing I like better than standing in front of an aquarium and just watching the fish. My favourites in particular are the rays. I just am mesmerised by them. Just two questions, really. Within the fish world, is there a hierarchy, particularly in the kind of environment which you have them? And also, do you have to intervene in terms of if you think things are getting too overcrowded, if the fish are just producing too many eggs, etc.? How do you sort out that and prevent it?
Sure. So in the tank, the hierarchy, well, if you mean that do big fish eat smaller fish, that's very much the case. That's very much the case. We have to be a little bit careful about who goes in with whom. So obviously we make sure that the size of the fish are compatible, or if they're not all the same sort of size, then that there's plenty of hiding places for the smaller fish. We also make sure we feed them very regularly. We actually scuba dive in this tank behind me here, and so we can hand feed the animals and target feed the larger and hungrier ones. For example, Jemima will take squids this size. You can be at one side of the tank and just hold up a squid and eyeball Jemima, and she'll come straight at you and snatch the squid out of your hand. But that's important, because otherwise she would be probably helping herself. And in terms of stocking, again, we're very careful about how many we have. Mostly the eggs, when our fish do breed, mostly, as I mentioned, for example, the bony fish will release the eggs into the water. So they will, unfortunately, we can't catch those. They will go down the filtration system. So we don't generally have successful breeding of the bony fish, apart from a couple of species such as the wolffish or the lumpsucker, which I haven't mentioned already. There is one wolffish in here, but he's always so well hidden. He's not really, there's no point in explaining, but some of them will, they lay a clump of eggs and then they protect them by wrapping their bodies around it. The wolffish is a really like a long eel-like shape with a bulky head and big teeth, which is why he gets his name. And one of my favorites, actually. They're really charismatic, but not always obvious. But they will be able to wrap around their eggs, and if we're lucky, we can scoop them out in time, as long as we get there before hungry mouths. But the rays and the dogfish, which will lay these purses, which we can collect really easily. Then we take these out and put them in a special hatchery, and just monitor them for the 9 months that it takes to hatch, and then we feed the smaller ones and keep them separate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Claire, I hear that the Pacific salmon is arriving on our shores. Is that correct?
I haven't heard it specifically. I think I was aware, actually, that they have been coming into some of our rivers. I'm not entirely sure how they're going to manage whether they will take over from the Atlantic salmon. But the Atlantic salmon, I know, is having a hard time. It is very challenged right now. I don't know exactly how the threat is from the Pacific, but it's something to be watchful for. I think it's come from farms, perhaps in Russia, for example, where they've been farming them.
Yeah, I think that's what I heard.
Mm.
Any other, Ian? You can unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear?
Hi,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, Claire, that was riveting stuff. We loved it. Basic question: Can you tell us how we spell RAS?
RAS.
RAS.
It's WRASSE. RAS. It's a group of fish that are very common around the world. There's lots of different species and they live from coral reefs. You'll have heard of the cleaner wrasse that will pick off parasites and dead scales and such from fish-like groupers. You'll have seen those in the David Attenborough films for sure. And we have actually some cleaner wrasse in our collection here. They're called gold cine wrasse. They're about this big, and they are actually employed, or they used to be employed in salmon farms. Rather than trying to put anti-lice chemicals and such in the water, they will use ballan wrasse and gold cine wrasse to pick off lice. So yeah, very useful little fish.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Pat, you can unmute yourself, Pat. Pat, you're muted. Pat, you're muted.
Yeah, there we go.
You can
Sorry. Yeah, I'm just saying, sorry it's so dark. It's we're in the middle of a thunderstorm here.
Oh,
you probably
no.
are as well, Claire. Yeah.
We have it. We have an amber warning for weather tonight. Yeah, so that's thunderstorms are always fun for us because we get power surges which kick out our pumps and our filtration system. So at that point we get phoned because if we're not on site, there's an alarm that goes off. Usually at something god awful time in the morning, like 1 o'clock in the morning. You have to get up and get yourself over here and try and start the pumps again because of course all the fish depend on the circulation systems. Anyway, I'm digressing. Sorry.
Well, I hope you don't get, because the last time we had a thunderstorm here, it wiped most of us out in the village. It just fried all our hubs and so on.
Oh no.
Anyway, coming back to marine, I get confused with when I was a youth. I was taught that our Atlantic salmon, they made the journey up the rivers, did their spawning, etc., and then went back out to sea. Is that correct?
They can do. It's not common because it's such an arduous journey that it takes it out of them, and usually the egg laying process and the mating, all of that is exhausting for them, and they've had that huge journey to get to the rivers. But it is known that some will survive it and will go back out and have another go. They'll go back out to feed, back out in the open sea, and come back. But it's not common, I don't think. I believe it's sort of once they've made that journey and come back up to breed, they're pretty much spent. They look pretty scabby. Yeah.
Because going from salt water to fresh water and back again must be a nightmare physiologically. But it also one of the things was about the Pacific salmon, of course. They definitely die off, don't they? The sockeye and all of that lot.
It's well documented that they are. You get those massive salmon runs up the rivers in Alaska, and you see all those fabulous pictures of bears and eagles and everything going after them. I mean, we have the same. I mean, the salmon have to have to run the gauntlet of a lot of predators when they come along here. I mean, they do follow the coastline, and in fact, that was a very important fishery for this area. They used to collect. They used to have what they call bag nets, and they would set these out from the coasts, and there would be a long trainer net which will divert the salmon from its coastal run kind of, and then into increasingly smaller and smaller and smaller nets, and until they were trapped in the end of the bag. And then fishers would go out in specially designed boats called cobbles, which are kind of a flat bottomed boat. They seemed really heavy and unwieldy, but a flat bottom boat, and they would row out and then bring the salmon in. And along this coastline, there's a lot of old salmon bothies, which are now obviously in ruins, but they would be brought there and dealt with and then taken to, well, there's places like in Port Soy or other areas where they had big ice houses, because ice was quite a new thing in those days. And then from there on, they would be dispatched across Europe. But yes, salmon also have to run the gauntlet of dolphins and seals, as well as ospreys, and such as Spey Bay. There's a big osprey population there. So yeah.
So the reason the salmon are struggling is not so much the salmon industry any longer. Are other things dominating them, like quality of water and
water quality in their rivers? That's a real problem. Habitat destruction. I think a lot of overfishing has been a problem. I mean, the salmon fishing at sea is still allowed. It's more regulated, and obviously on land it's much more regulated. But they have had, I think, climate change is also affecting them as well. So there's a number of different causes to salmon's plight just now.
I think Colin George has got a question.
Claire, you didn't mention crabs and lobsters, which seem to be the main catch of the little fishing areas.
Yes.
On the north side of the Firth. A particular reason?
That I didn't mention them just because I would have witted on all afternoon, all evening. But yes, we do have obviously a lobster fishery. I think the fishing industry has declined particularly, but we still do have quite a lot of numbers of smaller boats that will go out and set creels, and they will collect crabs and lobsters and sell those, obviously, particularly directed to the restaurants and such like. And yeah, that seems to be thriving still.
But you don't have them in your tank?
Oh yes, we do. Yes, crabs tend to take. Crabs tend to keep a low profile in this tank though, because most things would have them. Lobsters, we have a variety of large ones. We have European lobsters, and again, I didn't mention them because I wouldn't really be able to show you because they are in pipes. But we have actually a couple of lobsters which are an interesting colour. The European lobster is I'm sure you know, is blue. Browny blue, and some of them are very vibrant blue, and they turn red when they're cooked. But we actually have some red ones, and that's quite an interesting, just an anomaly in terms of the coloration of its carapace. But yeah, we have Linda the lobster, and she was brought to us from a fisherman who caught her off of Lewis, and he happened to be coming across to Macduff, or at least to one of the nearby towns for a family wedding, and so he brought Linda the lobster and donated her to be one of our stars. So yeah, we have an orange lobster, but it's a bit confusing because a lot of people think lobsters are orange anyway, but they're actually blue. Except Linda is special.
I've got another. Oh, there's.
Carry on, Pat.
Right. What is there any? I know we've got various protected areas around the Moray Firth, but there isn't a fishing exclusion as far as I'm aware within the Moray Firth.
No,
and it seems daft that we don't.
There, the section of the Moray Firth around us is actually going to be is under consideration for a marine protected zone, mostly for, I think, the seabirds. The inner Firth is protected as a special area of conservation for the dolphins. I'm not sure where we're at with that at the moment, though, in terms of the consultation and the process that it goes through before it's designated as an MPA. Interestingly, I was speaking about flapper skates earlier on in the evening, but just in March time of this year, they did designate an area by the Sound of Skye as a marine protected area for flapper skates. So there's a population on the west coast there that is now protected as well, or at least they're the nursery area where they think that they are finding a lot of these mermaid purses, and there is a recognised population there. So that's protected. So there is some hope there that these protected areas are developing and will hopefully interconnect in some way. But I think we're a bit of a way off yet from all of that, getting a nice connected, linked areas that are protected. But yeah.
Do you think the industrial lobby of the inner Moray Firth is probably too strong with government? Because it's
I haven't really got a very good in-depth knowledge of that. So I think a lot of people would still like to fish in this area, and it's still very important for a lot of livelihoods. The pelagic boats are the biggest ones, obviously, and they're going out into the open sea. But a lot of local guys still depend on their lobsters and their fish catch, lobsters and crabs. And I think if we had a no-take zones or marine protected areas, I think there would be an impact on livelihoods. So it's a really delicate balance, and there's a lot to be considered. So I don't think anything's moving very quickly for the Moray Firth at the moment.
Okay,
thanks.
Well, very much, Claire. Well, what size is your tank?
It's 5 meters deep by 10 meters across.
All right.
400,000 litres of water.
All right. And changing that every day is several times a day, you said, is.
Yes, we have some big pumps that do the work. So it's just constantly going. So we bring water in from the sea directly to reservoirs at the back of the aquarium. And then from there, the water goes through a chiller. Believe it or not, we actually cool the water down. So mostly to keep the temperature steady and stable for the fish. And then it also gets filtered through sand filters, which take out any particulate matter. And then it goes through UV sterilization, which zaps it of any microbes or pathogens that we don't want in the water. And then it eventually gets into the tanks. We also put compressed air around, so the air is bubbling into the tanks. You can maybe see the bubbles at the back there. I don't know, maybe the light isn't great, but that constantly provides aeration for the water as well. So it keeps the oxygen levels at a good level for the animals.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Claire. That was
You're so welcome.
And I suspect you'll have a few additional visitors after this presentation.
Oh, good.
Right. For all
well, now you know where we are.
Where we are.
Thank you very much.
I'm rather embarrassed. I've never been there, Claire.
That's all right. There's still time.
Right. Even at your age, Gordon.
Telling secrets. So for August, we've got a month off, but in September, we'll be very honoured as we'll have Urchin Casper from the Princess Maxima Hospital in Amsterdam talking to us about childhood cancer. Now, Urchin is recognised as one of the world's experts on the subject. And Princess Maxima, which Urchin was involved in the design of, is the largest children's hospital in Europe and very, very new as well. So it's a talk to look forward to. So thank you all very much. And I think it just leaves me to invite you all to lift your glasses and toast the Queen. The Queen. And thanks again, Claire. So, and
Thank you.
good night, everyone.
You're
Good night.
welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Good night and thank you.